And how can you use Berkeley to understand symbolic interactionism? Well, Berkeley introduces two very important concepts. And I'm going to use, if I can find my eraser, I'm going to use those concepts to describe the meaning of symbol or symbolic in symbolic interactionism. Okay. Imagine, if you will, and I might draw this character incorrect. I looked it up before I decided to do the video, so if I drew the character incorrectly, forgive me, but I think it's close to this. Imagine that I were to draw this character. And I think it's sort of like this, maybe. Imagine I were to draw that character, and you see this character, and I think I drew it, right? And you just see the character for what it is, right? It's got sort of 3 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines, and you understand that character for just that. There really isn't anything more in this symbol than, 3 vertical lines connected by 3 horizontal lines connected by 2 vertical lines. Berkeley actually has a term for this, right? Berkeley calls this what's known as direct perception. Direct perception. And all that's happening in direct perception is that the perceiver, the individual doing the looking, right, me, the perceiver is in receipt of sense data, right? I'm receiving sense data. Okay, so I'm receiving sense data. I'm receiving the sense data that this is blue. I'm receiving the sense data that there are 3 horizontal lines, that there are 2 vertical lines, and I can make an assessment of this thing, right? This thing, actually, technically, this thing is a symbol. It's not a symbol yet. Right now, all it is a shape, but it will be given the status. It'll be elevated to the status of a symbol once the shape has meaning, right? So that in talking about symbols, the first thing to recognize is that when we're talking about symbols, and this also holds true for icons, right? This also holds true for, this also holds true for icons, or if you're going to get in something as complex as iconography, this also holds true, that it is only a shape, it is only being directly perceived when I recognize it for its form, its basic form. It becomes a symbol, it becomes an icon once I attribute meaning to once I attribute meaning to the shape, right? So the symbol is nothing more than a shape, or object even, but typically a shape with meaning. Right? That's sort of the most basic way of describing and discussing symbols. All right. So up until now, all we've seen, according to Berkeley, is we've directly perceived this object as 3 horizontal lines connected by 2 vertical lines, and it's blue. Okay, so that's direct perception, and it's just receiving the sense data of what exists there. The next level, and the reason why I think this will connect into a discussion of symbolic interactionism, is that the next level is what's known as indirect perception. So indirect perception, P-E-R-C-E-P-T, indirect perception. Right? Indirect perception is substantially different from direct perception, because in indirect perception, it is not the case that all I'm simply doing is receiving the sense data. Right? Sense data has now been internalized. I have a representation of the symbol on the board. I can reproduce the symbol if need be. I'm not looking at it right now, but I have sort of a mental image of the symbol that I wrote and that I drew, and it's 3 horizontal lines connected by 2 vertical lines. But there still isn't any meaning attributed to the symbol or attributed to the shape. Now, attributing meaning to the shape is what indirect perception is, right? It is the attribution of meaning, right? The attribution of meaning. The attribution of meaning. Specifically, the attribution of meaning to objects, to shapes, to interactions, events, whatever it might be, right? I'm indirectly perceiving this once I know what this thing means. And if I drew it correctly, which I hope I did, or relatively close, this is the if I did it right, the Chinese character for the word sun, right? And if it's not the Chinese character for the word sun, I apologize, but I think it's roughly close to an Americanized version of the word sun, right? So now it's different because now when you look at this shape, you no longer are looking at the shape as you were initially, right? You might have been thinking that it looks like something else, right? Now when you see this shape, you know that this shape means sun. In a Western American sense, we recognize that this shape and this shape have the same meaning, right? The meaning of these two shapes are the same. So shared. We recognize that the forms are substantially different, right? This form and this form are two different forms. But despite the fact that the forms of these symbols are different, their meaning is the same, right? They have a shared meaning. This means A, and this means A. This means lowercase a, this means uppercase A. There was a time at which, when I was young, I didn't know what this meant, and I looked at this just like I looked at this. I recognized that this character means sun, and I recognize that this character means A, and now every time I look at this character, I recognize that that character means A, right? I look at that character as A. I don't look at it as just a form anymore. I don't look at it as just a shape. I recognize that it has meaning, right? And it's very substantial meaning. Not only does it mean A, but it has a particular pronunciation, it has a particular sound, you know, and so on. It has a particular significance in our alphabet, and so on. And that this meaning is shared. Now, the reason why I introduced Berkeley in a discussion of symbolic interactionism is, it should be more apparent now, is that using Berkeley's idea of, or distinction between direct and indirect perception facilitates an understanding of symbolic interactionism, because we realize that symbolic interactionism takes place on the level of indirect perception, right? It is the attribution of meaning to forms and figures and shapes in the world, that we attain a sense of the significance, the importance of the world, and also of ourselves, so that we're interacting, human beings, I'm going to erase this now, so that human beings are interacting with symbols, right? We interact as human beings with symbols, and I'll put, let me just put a symbol. That'll be our symbol. Human beings interact with symbol, and human beings also interact with, obviously, other human beings, right? So I interact with human beings, and I interact with symbols. This is the nature of our relationship, our interaction with symbols, our interaction with human beings. We recognize that this is the interaction. And we recognize that in our interaction with symbols, our interaction is done on the basis of indirect perception, right? In the Berkeleyan sense, right? Indirect perception. The attribution of meaning has already been given to the shape, and we interact with the shape as the shape is being A, not the shape is just being, you know, a particular geometrical figure with particular dimensions and so on, right? That's not how we interact with the objects. Similarly, when I'm interacting with individuals, with human beings, I have a sense of myself. I gain a sense of myself through a process, that I'm going to describe in a little bit, right? So the interaction with others is something like this, right? It's something like this. Individuals have a perception of me as X, and based on my interaction with individuals, I come to have an understanding of myself as X. If I have an understanding of myself as, let's just say, Y, and every time I interact with an individual, they see me as X, well, you can see how I will have this discontent, right? There will be a divorce, sort of, if you will, a psychological schism between the way that I feel that I am and the way that I am treated in the world, right? So there has to be some confluence between the way that I think of myself and the way that others perceive me, right?